Welcome back to the final segment of the Sportsmemo College Football Every Game on the Board podcast with our closer, Robbie Veno. Rob, welcome into the pod. How are you?
I am doing great today, Drew. A little cold and it's snow and ice here in southeastern Pennsylvania, but otherwise real good. Obviously, the games still go on, so we work through rain, ice, sleet, or snow. I guess that's the postman's thing, but I guess it's ours too.
Yeah, we can make it ours, and we're getting this one off late. Robbie had a lot to do today, handicapping and dealing with the snow, so something to keep in mind as far as handicapping this weekend's college football NFL cards. Maybe there might be some advantages to be had. We will be going 401 Kansas, Oklahoma down to the end of the card on this segment. The prior segments with Teddy Covers, Brent Crow are up on sportsmemo.com. We encourage you to listen to them. We also put out a college basketball podcast today as well. So all good stuff, good info, hopefully getting you on the right side. And before we get into this, Robbie Veno, he's been good. His top plays, best bets, 31-15 college football, 67% on the year. And we have a special coupon code Friday9 at checkout for his Friday play, best bet for only $9 at sportsmemo.com. Robbie, first game up here to close it out, 401-402 in the Big 12, Kansas at Oklahoma. Big spread here. The Sooners laying 36 in Norman, 69 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, for KU. Remember last week, Drew, we made a little bit of a joke out of it. Win one for the Gipper with David Beatty being fired by Kansas, but they came through. Point spread wise against K-State, 21-17 loss, hard-fought battle by Kansas, as you would expect in that in-state rivalry, and especially with K-State not being a more dominant team this year. Kansas was able to keep that one close, but you wonder if maybe there's not too much left in the tank here for Oklahoma, which has just been offensively dominant all season long. We're not telling anybody anything new, but Oklahoma, Drew, 9-1 over the total this year, but in 4 of their last 6 games, their game totals have hit 90 points plus. Always makes you lean toward looking first at Oklahoma games over. This one, I think, is in the 68 range. The defense has obviously helped to get those point totals for games up as high as they've been, 90 plus in 4 of the last 6. But I will say this, as bad as Oklahoma has been overall defensively, if you just go back 2 games, let's go back 1 month, and the first 2 games, October 20th and October 27th, they played TCU and Kansas State, which are comparable offenses to Kansas. Neither one of those 2 teams, TCU or Kansas State, is a high-flying offense. And Oklahoma was able to hold each of those teams to 275 yards and 245 yards. So, Oklahoma's defense has been lit up by good offenses. Can Peyton Bender, Puka Williams Jr., can these guys light it up? Not so sure. It puts the total a little bit in question here. Don't like the side either way because wouldn't want to lay that many points, and not real sure how much Kansas has left after the effort versus K-State last week.
Robbie, we've got a Pac-12 matchup here. Another big spread in conference, 403-404. Oregon State at Washington, 33.5. The Huskies laying at home, 58.5 the total.
Yeah, Oregon State's been a defensive disaster, so initial inclination would be let's take a look at Washington and see, because when you look at Oregon State and some of the losses they've had, they've just given up a ton of points. But the Washington offense hasn't been good, Drew. Not good enough for me to lay a whole bunch of points with them. Oregon State with Jake Luton back at quarterback the last couple of weeks have a balanced offense. If nothing else, their O has been pretty good this year. It's really, when you look at both matchups on the field, Oregon State's defense is lousy, but so is Washington's offense, and Washington's defense is superior, and Oregon State's offense going up against it is their best unit. So a lot of contradictory stuff here. Perhaps Washington could just hand the ball off to Myles Gaskin and win this game, but I don't know that I could lay the points with them in this one. Washington, for as good as they're supposed to be, their point differential this year, 266 scored, 160 given up. That's not the mark of an elite team. Last week they come off a survival-type victory against Stanford, 27-23, before they went into the bye. We'll see how Chris Peterson brings them out of the bye for these last two games. But I'll tell you what, their eyes may be on the Apple Cup, which comes next week, the Friday after Thanksgiving. That's the most important game for Washington. So I don't know. Maybe they sleepwalk through this one. We'll see. If nothing else, Oregon State's given effort all season long.
Yeah, that would be a fun one. That can ruin Wazoo's chances at the playoff possibly. That could be a good one in the Apple Cup. We got 405, 406, two of the better teams in the Sun Belt this year, Robbie. Louisiana Monroe at Arkansas State, 68.5 the total. Looks like Ark State laying 8 in Jonesboro.
Yeah, and that side of the Sun Belt, Drew, that division is really coming down to the wire because all three of those teams, UL Monroe, which sits in first place right now, UL Lafayette, and Arkansas State, they all have a chance to win it. There's a scenario where all three, any one of the three, could win that division and go to the Sun Belt title game. So very important matchup here for UL Monroe and Arkansas State. I would probably lean towards the Red Wolves at this point in time because the offense, we waited for it, and then it busted out a few weeks back against Georgia State, and they haven't calmed down since. 51 that day against Georgia State, 43 against Lafayette, 38 against South Alabama, and then 44 last week against Coastal Carolina. Justice Hansen and company have been on fire. UL Monroe got away last week, Drew. We mentioned it on the podcast about how they had two starting linebackers out last week, and they got away with it because South Alabama couldn't get out of their own way, and they've been a bad offensive team all season long. But I don't know if UL Monroe gets away with those defensive injuries this week. Now, there's question marks next to both guys' names, but reading between the lines, I don't know that either one's going to go. And if they do go, reading what I've read, it doesn't seem to me that they're very healthy. So the way Arkansas State's playing offense right now, I'd have to give them an edge, a superior edge against a team that has a little defense to begin with, and then to lose two of your best guys in the middle, the second level of the defense. I'd probably take Arkansas State there.
We got another Sun Belt matchup here. Texas State at Troy, 48.5 the total, with the Trojans laying 23.5 in Troy.
Boy, Troy's been so good defensively. They overcame the injury to starting quarterback Caleb Barker. The defense has really carried them. The offense has been good enough under Neil Brown. They don't necessarily light the board up, but they get, to that 30 range, and it's enough. Troy State this year, 34 quarterback sacks on the season. One of the most dominant pass rushing teams inside the Sun Belt, and that could be integral in this game here. Like I said, I think you can ride Troy's defense to a point spread cover. The defense can even help the offense out in this one. I know Everett Withers has made strides with Texas State the second half of the season, but that offense, Drew, you've seen it enough too. It's still iffy at best, and I think against a team like this that really comes at you, like I say, 34 quarterback sacks, they're disruptors. I think that could be troublesome. You have to lay 23.5 here. You're looking at having to win this game about 34-10. It's not something I'd go crazy with, but it's certainly something that's feasible.
Robbie, we've got South Alabama, Louisiana Lafayette up next in the same conference here, Sun Belt Conference, 64.5 the total. Lafayette laying 18.5 at home.
They're in good shape this week. Last week, Trey Regis, their top running back, got hurt, but Elijah Mitchell, they're kind of like 1 in 1A, like an entry at a horse race. Elijah Mitchell played in his place once Regis went out and had a pretty good game, but both of those guys are going to play here. They're set again at the wide receiver spot. So offensively, UL Lafayette has everything in place against what's been a miserable South Alabama defense. And remember, South Alabama, one of those teams that has gone the route of the true freshman at the end of the season, putting a lot of new guys on the field just to see what they have. It's kind of an experimental process these last few games. With everything at stake for Lafayette, as I mentioned earlier, they have a chance to win their division and go to the Sun Belt Championship game. I think their offense will really click in this game. For South Alabama, you might get a combination of quarterbacks again. Last week we got Cephas Johnson, the freshman, as the starter. Threw a 34-yard touchdown pass but wasn't overly effective, so they replaced him with Cole Garvin, who had sat out, Drew, I think it was like 8 games due to suspension, and came back last week. Cole Garvin, remember, had started games for South Alabama last year. He came in. Both of these guys split time the entire game. Each one played 5 series. So you might see that again. Articles I've read indicate that you'll see that again. Johnson's going to be your starter, but you'll get a split. A lot of freshmen on the field. They might score a little bit more than they did last week, though, with Cephas Johnson now getting a little comfortable, some game action under his belt. And for Lafayette, as healthy as they are on the offensive side, not quite the same on the defensive side. Not a lot of playmakers over there, but a couple of key ones hurt. I might look at the total going over in that game.
Robbie, heading to the ACC, we got 4-11, 4-12. Miami at Virginia Tech, 51.5 the total. I don't know what Miami's doing laying 6 on the road in Lane Stadium, but I think that points to something that's going on with Virginia Tech and not wanting that side. But how do you view betting this one?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you, Drew, because for Miami of Florida, it's 5 consecutive point spread losses. They were real good to start the season, and ever since then, we know about the quarterback rotation that's going on there between the two starting QBs, back and forth. They haven't generated anything on the ground. They can't generate anything through the air. The defense has carried them to this point where they're 5-5 now, and basically is scrounging for a bowl bid at this point in time. So it's very important to them to get the bowl bid. Virginia Tech, just a defensive mess. Documented that all season long. Starts in the defensive secondary. They have very little pass rush as well. It's kind of tough, Drew, because you just don't know if Miami can exploit the defensive weaknesses of Virginia Tech. If nothing else, Virginia Tech has a couple of explosive plays in their bag. But then again, this is a pretty good defensive unit. They may be able to shut them down. I'd probably look under in this game. Miami's been trending to the under the second half of the season. They've played 4 consecutive games under the total. None of those games have exceeded 48 points. For Miami, I'd like to be on them, but the offensive questions are too much, even though Virginia Tech has so many defensive problems. I might look under in that game.
Robbie, 4-13, 4-14, UTEP at Western Kentucky, 47 the total, WKU laying 7 at home.
Yeah, I mean, we followed Western Kentucky close all season long, whether it be offensive line injuries, whether it be quarterback injuries, running back injuries. They just have had a tough time of it offensively for Mike Sanford Jr. In his second year. They're going to hang with Stephen Duncan at quarterback this week. It'll be his 4th start. Pretty good thrower of the football, Drew. I'll say this. Western Kentucky's had a lot of bad offensive efforts throughout the season, and there's a couple of times when I've come on the podcast after reading stuff about them and where they proclaimed that the offensive line healthier and gelling, and they'd come out and lay an egg. The one game where they played a defense second half of the season that's comparable to what Texas El Paso will show them was Old Dominion. And in that Old Dominion game, WKU scored 34. Since that game, and they lost that game in a terrible fashion at the end. But since that game, they've had to face Florida International, Middle Tennessee, and Florida Atlantic, which would be 3 of your top defenses in CUSA. Step down in class for them here. I think they might score some. All that being said, Texas El Paso, who probably nobody in the country even pays a half a bit of attention to, but they've been sneaky good offensively towards the end of the season. Dana Dimmel, his team put up 32 against Middle Tennessee last week, 34 in their only victory on the season against Rice the week before. And if you go back 6 games, they haven't scored less than 21 in any of those games except for the one shutout loss to UAB, who's been dominant defensively all season long. So this total sits in the area of 47 and a half, something nobody's going to look at. There's not going to be any mad rush to the window to play El Paso, Western Kentucky over the number. But those are the types of games where we can make some cash. I think these two might get it up and over. Dimmel at least has something going offensively with this team right now.
Heading up to Big Ten country, got 4-15, 4-16, Michigan State at Nebraska. Sparty only laying 1 on the road, 49 the total. This number kind of surprised me. I'd be laying a little bit more with Michigan State. How do you feel?
Yes, certainly Adrian Martinez and Nebraska have come a long, long way the last 4 games or so. Scott Frost saw him interviewed Monday, or at least his press conference Monday, coaches conference. Very pleased with the development of the offense. They strike from anywhere. Michigan State brings that tremendous run defense to the table every single game, but the pass defense has been, maybe adequate at best so far this season. They've been able to stop the rush. They haven't been able to stop the pass. It was a hard-fought game last week for Michigan State against Ohio State. You wonder how much that might have drained them. To me, Nebraska right now is on a confidence high. The one thing to watch out for in this game, Drew, is there's weather situation here, and there's a heavy winds in this game. Probably going to be somewhere in between 20, 25 miles per hour. Only reason I bring it up is because Brian Lewerke, the quarterback for Michigan State, has been dealing with a shoulder injury for the last 3 games, and you don't want to have a quarterback who can't really get the ball downfield having to throw into wind for 2 quarters out of 4. That kind of stagnates what Michigan State would be able to do from the offensive side. True that, Nebraska's defense has been so horrendous that you can hand it off and gain yardage, but I think balance would be necessary in this contest for Michigan State. I wouldn't be surprised to see a real confident Nebraska team win this game, but cold temperatures and wind, again, think about Lewerke for anybody that would like to play Michigan State here, and just know that there is a possibility that for half the game they'll only be able to run the football because of his injury.
Robbie, heading to the Big 12, we got Iowa State at Texas, 47 the total. In one of the few ranked versus ranked games this weekend, we only got Notre Dame, Syracuse, UCF, Cincinnati in this one, I believe, just because of the scheduling with next week being the major rivalry week. But either way, it's a close spread, 2.5 or 3, depending where you shop. That's Texas laying it at home.
If Iowa State had David Montgomery, their top running back, for the whole game, I don't think I would hesitate to play Iowa State on the road here. But a little bit of a fight last week. Montgomery has to sit the first half. It's enough to at least make me think twice about going to the window with Iowa State in this game. Love their defense. It's certainly better than the Texas defense. Love what Brock Purdy's been able to do as a freshman quarterback for this team, coming in because of injury circumstances about 5 games ago and just playing lights out football for Iowa State. Texas comes off of a game that they had in the bag last week against Texas Tech, and all of a sudden Jet Duffy and company came flying back in the fourth quarter to tie that game. Texas needed an extremely late touchdown just to win, got out of Dodge alive, survived to play this game. I think at this point in time, Drew, just looking at these two teams, Iowa State is the better of the two. Of course, there is a race to get into one of those top 2 spots in this conference so they can play in the Big 12 title game. Right now, these two teams both sit in good spots. It's almost like an elimination game here. Whichever team loses will have no opportunity. I just think Iowa State's the better squad right now. I'd ride their defense for the first half, and when they get Montgomery back in the second half, if you're going to get involved in this game and the line dictates a play at halftime, you might want to get involved second half with Iowa State with Montgomery in there.
I like it, Robbie. We got the battle for L.A., USC at UCLA. The Trojans laying 3, I guess you could say, on the highway, the other side of town, 55 the total, Robbie.
Without going into any fundamental analysis, any situational analysis, any of that stuff, I think just one factor would play a role for me in playing this game. And generally, I don't handicap that shallow. Like to dig, like to have more than one reason to go to the window with somebody. But if I was going to play this game, I would just play UCLA based on the fact that that's why they hired Chip Kelly, to come in here and beat USC. And USC is in a downward spiral right now, whether it be injuries, whether it be Clay Helton firing the offensive coordinator or taking over play calling duties, and still not performing. The freshman quarterback has not stepped up the way they thought he might. A lot going against USC this late in the season, and what the heck? UCLA is off of a close loss last week to Arizona State, 31-28. But I could keep this one real simple and just say, if there's a game that's circled by the head coach Chip Kelly on the schedule for this year to keep his backers happy, to keep the administration happy, the fan base happy, it would be this USC game. I could see UCLA winning this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think UCLA is the side as well. And guys, we got 2 games left. Both of the late night variety, 2 good ones to end it. Remember the coupon code Friday9. That's FRIDAY with the number 9 at the end, no spaces, all capital letters for Robbie's Friday night play. 4% for only $9 for that play. That's $16 off the retail price. Robbie, 421-422, a get back special. San Diego State at Fresno State, 43 the total at most shops. Looks like 13.5 Fresno State laying at home.
Yeah, Fresno let one get away on the road last week at Boise State, and it was an important one between those two. Fresno had a lead, and really you felt like, Drew, up until about midway third quarter, you really felt like Fresno State was dominating more than the scoreboard showed, but they didn't put enough space between themselves and Boise at home rallied, win that game 24-17. So probably an angry Fresno State team here to take on SDSU, which surprisingly loses straight up to UNLV last week. For San Diego State, there's more complications because they lose 2 of their top offensive linemen for this game. Starting tackle, starting guard, Tyler Rimmer, Keith Ismail. Both of these guys have had 23 consecutive starts for San Diego State. You just can't lose guys like that. That's 46 starts in a row by that tandem. And they're out for this game against a very, very good Fresno State defense. Fresno State up front has been good at the point of attack all season long. And I would expect, we've seen enough out of San Diego State's offense. It's really no different than any other San Diego State offense under Rocky Long. Very predictable, without linemen to block for the run game. I believe Fresno State could just smother them here. I don't know how San Diego State is going to muster up any more than 10, possibly 13 points. Maybe their defense can help out, but I think Fresno State's the right side here. Those are bad injuries at a tough time for San Diego
Robbie,
State.
we got the real get back special, the degenerate special, the one in Hawaii, 11 p.m. Eastern kick, UNLV at Hawaii. 70.5 the total. Looks like the Rainbow Warriors laying 6.5, 1-7 out there on the board. Robbie, I got an opinion on this, being Hawaii getting a late season bye week. We know how important those are. UNLV off of a huge win last week, now hitting the road, going out to the island. I know Hawaii's dropped 4 straight, maybe 6 of 7 ATS. I just think if you're going to look to buy on Hawaii, it's now. I would be on the Rainbows. I haven't bet it yet. What's your feel on it?
Well, we talked about this type of situation a lot, Drew. These teams that had to play in that so-called week 0, Hawaii was one of them. They played 11 consecutive football games before that bye. That's just a tough schedule to go through. And you could see they were fatigued. How about the last 4 games? Before they hit that bye week, they gave up 49 to BYU, 40 to Nevada, 50 to Fresno, 56 to Utah State. The defense isn't very good to begin with, and they've lost their best player on the defensive side. So I don't expect the bye week to all of a sudden make Hawaii a better defensive team, whether it be Max Gilliam quarterbacking UNLV or whether it be Armani Rogers. Armani Rogers had an opportunity to play last week. I don't know if that was just precautionary that they didn't play him, and they're not really tipping their hand as to which one of these 2 guys will play this week. But whether it be the running quarterback Rogers, whether it be the passing quarterback Gilliam, they can score points against Hawaii. I think that the rest factor, the bye week for Hawaii, will pay off in the form of an offense that was clicking on all cylinders early. Cole McDonald had a little bit of an injury towards the 5th game, I think it was. When he came back, they weren't really as in sync as they had been to start the season. I think you get McDonald with a week off. You get his receiving core, an excellent receiving core, Ursua, Bird, JoJo Ward, those guys against a rotten UNLV defense. The total 70.5 for a reason. I think this game's going to go up and down the field. Like I say, Tony Sanchez, the head coach for UNLV, can play at Coy. He could even go 2-quarterback system and really mess Hawaii up here defensively. I think late night especially, you probably see a bit of a track.
All right, Robbie, anything else you want to throw out before we shut this down?
You know what? Anybody that owns a shovel that would like to do my driveway and front walk, you can go ahead and direct message me on Twitter and come on over as the snow and ice keep coming down here. But we'll be back for the NFL tomorrow, Drew. We'll take care of some NFL podcasting, and tonight 3 good games in college football. So good luck to everybody out there, whether you're playing NBA, college hoop, NFL, CFB. A lot to choose from now. Hopefully you're cashing tickets. Real quick,
because you brought it up, I'm glad you did. What about weather-wise, betting Saturday's card? Anything that really jumps off the page at you?
Yeah, not necessarily, because this is going to pass through, so it won't affect – I mean, it'll be cold, Drew, but there's not going to be very much in the way of snow affecting games or ice or wind. So cold temperatures for sure. 30s, high 20s, but I don't think it's going to affect any of the Eastern Seaboard games on Saturday.
Question for you: cold, does that favor unders or overs, or?
You know, there's been something. I'll give you my theory, and just my theory. In cold weather, in my opinion, watching enough football, there's a lot of defenses that don't want to tackle after a while in cold weather. It just hurts to tackle. Anybody who's put pads on before and played in cold knows what it's like. So I think that, again, we say this so often, Drew, you just can't make general theories on games. I think it's all situational. Obviously, a team like Michigan with a defense that they have, they could care less if it's 4 below. They're still going to hit you. But you take some of these soft defenses and put them in cold weather. UConn Huskies, who play in cold weather, teams like that, they're going to start shying away from hits. So I think it's just check the teams that are playing, check the defenses that are out there, and in my opinion, cold can sometimes lead to really high-scoring games.
Great way to end it. We got the coupon code Friday9 at checkout. That's Friday9. Type that in at sportsmemo.com for Robbie's Friday night action for just $9. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow with Rob Veno, Teddy Covers, covering NFL, every game on the board. Best of luck with your bets.